we see folks from your community who generally has this idea that fat is free food.
Yeah.
They eat like butter. You can. So, where did this
Yeah.
thought process evolve in you? Like, where did you make the switch into this newer?
Yeah. So, over the 20 plus years of doing this, we've always had a couple principles. Number one, I come from engineering, so I'm always trying to learn something new. I'm always learning what the latest thing is, what works, what doesn't work. I'm never kind of hedged into a certain dogma or anything. And so over the 20 plus years of helping clients, we kind of just follow what works best. And we see there were definitely times when we were kind of looking at that higher fat approach, and when our clients would use it, they just didn't see the results they would if we just prioritized protein and moderated the fat a bit more. So we always just kind of follow what works best, and then back that up with the science understanding that we're learning. But I think it kind of comes from the root of that myth, if you will, is that fat doesn't affect insulin. And thus, since insulin is this master storage hormone that if you don't elevate insulin, you can't store fat, is the kind of thought process there. But it's flawed on a couple levels. First of all, fat will affect insulin. In the short term, postprandial, it's just a little bit compared to, protein is more and carbohydrates are even more of their stimulation of insulin. But if you look over a 24-hour window, fat actually has an even bigger impact on overall insulin requirements. And this is something people don't really notice so much if you're not really looking for it. And there's great studies on this. There's one with type 1 diabetics. What's great about type 1s, you know exactly how much insulin it takes to keep their glucose under control, both the basal or baseline insulin as well as after meals and insulin boluses for meals. So you know exactly how many units of insulin they needed for the day. They took 2 meals with quite a few type 1 diabetics. They took 2 meals and same protein and carbs. They just increased the fat by 60 grams in the second meal versus the first meal. And then they looked at 24 hours of insulin needed for those type 1 diabetics. For the extra fat, their insulin requirements for the day went up like, I think it was 42%, because it creates this long tail. And it's not just so much right after the meal, but all day long, more insulin is required, or a lot of that. Basically, you're increasing the basal insulin, or that baseline insulin, all day long. So if you integrate under the curve, you've got a lot more insulin that's required over the course of the day. And so that's one of the problems with that thought process. The other part is the fundamental problem that I have with the carbohydrate insulin model. So the carbohydrate insulin model is what a lot of those people believe, which is if carbohydrates raise insulin, and then the elevated insulin locks the fat in your fat cells, makes it hard to burn the fat, if you will. And if you don't spike the insulin, then you can't store the fat, and it's really easy to lose weight. The problem with that is, fundamentally, I mean, you can just think about this in a number of ways. Number one, vegetarians eat a lot of carbohydrates and they can lose weight, right? So it's not, locking their fat cells. The other analogy you can look at is that insulin, it's generally understood across the board that as you lose body fat, your basal insulin will come down, right? So as you lose body fat, your basal, your fat, your insulin all day long will come down. So if the carbohydrate insulin model is true, then shouldn't the first 10 pounds of weight loss be the hardest? Shouldn't the first 10 pounds be the hardest? Because your fasting insulin's quite high at that point because you're overweight. But now you've lost 10 pounds, so your fasting insulin's come down. So shouldn't the next 10 pounds be even easier? And then after you lose that 10 pounds, your insulin's even lower. So now that you keep going, and the last 10 pounds should be the easiest because your insulin's way down, right? Well, it's the opposite, right? First 10 is a lot easier than the last 10. So, there's just a lot of things you can look at here to say, yeah, that theory doesn't really flesh out. And the science, the studies really support this. You can store all the fat you eat. The body has no problem storing. And the alternative to if it didn't store it in your fat cells is not good. High triglycerides, fat in your liver, fat in your pancreas, around your organs. Like, you don't want that. You want it to be stored in the fat cells.
Right. So that's a very interesting perspective. It is always easiest to lose that initial weight. So,
Yeah.
so my next question is, there is this another question, another thing that floats around in the regarding the carb insulin model is that calories don't matter, right? That's the common thing out there. So, what's your take on this? How much does the calories matter compared to the quality of food or the what your macros?
Yeah, people get hung up on that, and talk about, well, what's a calorie in the body? Well, it's just a measure of energy. At the end of the day, energy and matter are really the same, two versions of the same thing, right? It's just a way to calories are just a way to quantify. Is it perfect? No. Nothing would be unless you could like count carbons or something and associate carbons in and carbons out or something like that. But at the end of the day, it's just a metric to help you understand how much total energy there is. And yeah, that matters, right? I mean, if it didn't matter, a couple simple analogies. If calories didn't matter and the carbohydrate insulin model was true, if I ate zero carbohydrates, I should never be able to gain body fat, right? Because I'm zero carb. And guess what? I've been zero carbohydrate for essentially carnivore for like 7-8 years, eating primarily just animal proteins. And I can gain and lose 10 pounds. Usually I overindulge a bit over the holidays. Again, on basically zero carb, diet, and I'll gain 5-10 pounds. And come here to Hawaii and I'll start eating a lot of fish and leaner proteins, and I'll shed that 10 pounds. So, I mean, it's obviously not true. And anybody that's eaten this way long enough will tell you, yeah, I can gain and lose weight, depending how much I eat. And so calories do matter. I think the composition of those calories is more important. How much carbs, protein, and fat is in your diet, for a number of reasons. But yeah, calories definitely do matter.